Since the first Sunday of Advent until very recently, until Pentecost, the Church in the liturgy has drawn our attention to the mysteries surrounding the intervention of God in human history, beginning with the Incarnation, the birth of Christ, and then moving up until very recently to Pentecost. But then before we kind of plunge into this long season of ordinary time, the Church turns our attention one last time to the mystery of the Incarnation, but in particular the mystery of the Incarnation as it applies to the present day through the Eucharist, through the sacrament of Christ's body and blood, and in a particular way through the sacrament of Christ's body and blood as offered on the cross. It's no accident that he instituted the Eucharist on Holy Thursday, the evening before his crucifixion on Good Friday. And so we have this sacrament of the Eucharist as the continuation of Christ's presence, are remaining with us and a sacrificing of himself for us to accompany us on the way through our life here on earth. It is an extraordinarily eloquent testament of the love that God has for us, that he offers himself to us even to the point of being our food, our nourishment and our strength. And then beyond that, he remains with us in silence. He locks himself away in a little box and then offers us the consolation also of his presence. We can go to him, pour out our hearts, listen to what he has to say to us in the Eucharist. It's really an extraordinary gift, and many Catholics have, of course, realized this, written about it, and perhaps quite famously, J.R.R. Tolkien, the author of The Lord of the Rings, in a letter that he wrote to one of his sons, said, "Out of the darkness of my life, so much frustrated, I put before you the one great thing to love on earth, the Blessed Sacrament. There you will find romance, glory, honor, fidelity, and the true way of all your loves on earth, and more than this, death." The death part might throw us off a little bit, but we realize, of course, that death is a part of the Eucharist because it is the sacrament of Christ's sacrifice. But really more than this, in a sense, we know that when we encounter love, it demands an in-kind response. We recognize this perhaps most clearly in the negative. When someone loves a person, falls madly in love, head over heels, and so on, and then just begins to do everything and receives absolutely nothing in return. We recognize this as a kind of a tragic trope. It comes up in literature sometimes. And it's the same with the Eucharist. We receive the Eucharist, and we have the Eucharist as this sacrament of God's love, his desire to not just to pour himself out, like to sacrifice himself one time in history, but to be sure that act of love remains with us and accompanies us on the way, strengthens us, nourishes us, fills us with life. And so this sacrament, really, this great act of love that God has done in making himself available so thoroughly to us, asks of us that in-kind response, asks us to surrender everything, whatever it is, our delights, our perhaps our ambitions, our relatives, our friends, and most keenly, I think, our time and our energy, things that we really do like to think that are ours to control and dispose of as we see fit. All of these things, by the generosity of the sacrifice of Christ and the generosity of the Eucharistic sacrament, we are called to lay all of these things down, to surrender them to Christ, to dispose of as he sees fit, rather than sort of reserving themselves for us. We do this, of course, very concretely every time we attend Mass. It's a moment where we take everything that's going on in our lives and we lay it at the feet of Christ. We offer ourselves to him as he offers himself to us. And quite frankly, we get the far better deal out of that. We receive far more than we give. But even beyond this, we know, because of that divine paradox that runs through the heart of Christianity, that this death that we experience in surrendering ourselves is transformed into something far greater. In the same way that Christ's death was transformed into the resurrection, our surrender, our death that we experience, is transformed into something far greater than what we first offered. So we have today this feast of Corpus Christi, not so much to reflect on our own worthiness, our own generosity, and so on, but really to reflect on and appreciate the great gift of the Eucharist. It is, as said, an extraordinary testament of the love of God, an extraordinary act of love for us in making himself present. And it is a day where the Church stops to marvel and to appreciate the great things that the Lord has done, certainly through the course of salvation history, but then even in making himself present to us in the present day, simply and sheerly out of love for us, for no reason more than that, to nourish us, to fill us with his life, to lead us into that perfect union that he calls us to. So we thank God today for this gift of the Eucharist. We pray certainly for an increase in faith in our own lives and in the great gift of the Eucharist, an increase in the faith of the whole Church, and an appreciation, a true appreciation of the Eucharist that inspires us to lay down our own lives in response to the great gift that God has made for us in laying down his life for us.